Hello, my name's Blair. And when my brother got into law school, my parents threw him a $15,000 party. Champagne, speeches, a slideshow. A year later, I got into a better program. And they said, money's tight. No party, no toast, not even a we're proud of you. But what they didn't know is that I sent something to their celebration anyway, something they had to open, right in front of everyone. They used my name for applause. But what if that letter I sent was the moment everything they built started to fall apart? There are certain nights you don't forget, not because something beautiful happened, but because it didn't, and the absence stains everything that came after. For me, that night was wrapped in golden string lights and clinking champagne glasses in my parents' backyard. Everyone was smiling, swaying to jazz under rented canopies, dressed like they were attending a country club gala. It was the night my brother Eland got into law school. I was there, of course. Standing just outside the light, my plastic cup filled with warm white wine, I remember the click of my mother's heels on the stone patio as she floated from guest to guest, delivering her speech like she was the keynote speaker at a scholarship banquet. "This," she said, "is what it looks like when your child brings honor to your name." Her hand was on Eland's shoulder. His smile, the kind that had always been easy for him, radiated out to the neighbors, the co-workers, the distant relatives who suddenly remembered our address. In the slideshow that played later that night, I was in exactly one photo, a blurry corner of a Thanksgiving table from 5 years back. No one noticed, not even me, until I found myself scanning the sequence for my own face and came up empty. At the time, I told myself it was his night. I played the part of the supportive sister. I even helped pack the leftover hors d'oeuvres afterward. But something about that evening stayed with me. Not the party itself, but the ease with which I disappeared into the background. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the reader, the creative. Eland was the future attorney from the moment he joined Model UN in 6th grade. I was Blair. No one ever said I wasn't smart. They just never said much at all. I learned early on that it was better to smile and blend in than to speak up and be reminded why no one was listening. And that night, watching them all celebrate like Eland had cured cancer, I felt the distance between us calcify. A year passed. I graduated with honors, studied for the LSAT in the quiet corners of my shared apartment, and applied to law schools without telling anyone. It wasn't secrecy. It was survival. When the acceptance letter arrived, I cried. Then I laughed. Then I made myself a cup of coffee and folded the letter neatly into my journal. I waited 2 days before telling them. It was a Tuesday. We were having dinner. My mother made lasagna from the frozen tray, and Dad was on his second glass of Cabernet when I said it. "I got in," I told them. My father blinked. "To what?" "Columbia. Law." There was a pause. Calvina looked up from her plate and said, "Oh, that's good. Too bad money's tight this year." That was it. No, "We're proud of you." No, "We knew you could do it." Just a reminder of financial limits that had apparently lifted for Eland, but hardened when it came to me. I nodded, smiled, took another bite of the overbaked pasta. But something inside me cracked. After that, I started noticing everything. How Calvina still posted throwbacks of Eland in his internship blazer, but never mentioned my name online. How Gareth forwarded articles about the bar exam to Eland, but never to me. How even my sister-in-law introduced me as Eland's little sister, like my identity only existed in orbit around his. I stopped trying to insert myself. I didn't ask why I wasn't included. I already knew. Inclusion would mean recognition, and recognition would mean admitting they'd underestimated me. Instead, I wrote in my journal. I drank more coffee. I learned to breathe through resentment like it was smog you just had to live with. Until one night, after another silent dinner where Eland's firm promotion was met with a toast and my midterm win went unmentioned, I realized something. In this house, success only mattered if it came with bragging rights, if it made them look good, and mine didn't, not to them. That night, I wrote one sentence on the last page of my journal. Success only matters here when they can hang it on a wall. Then I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark, wondering what it would feel like to be celebrated. Not for optics, not for them, but for me. I didn't say anything right away. After that dinner, after Calvina's casual dismissal of my law school acceptance like I'd mentioned finding a coupon, I gave myself a week. One full week to see if anyone would bring it up again. A text, a call, an accidental, "We're proud of you." Nothing. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, while eating a lukewarm sandwich at my desk, an email came through. The subject line made me blink. Holloway Family Law School Celebration, honoring Eland Blair. It was from a catering company, not from Calvina, not from Gareth. Just a mass-forwarded message from a business account, fonts too large, my name bolded in a slightly different shade of blue. I stared at it for several seconds before I even opened it. The details were as impersonal as they were polished. A private banquet room at a local hotel, cocktail hour at 6, dinner at 7, dress code, formal. The RSVP list was linked at the bottom. I clicked. My name was on it, misspelled Blaire. They added an extra E. That small silent vowel punched harder than any insult I could remember. I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, technically, I was invited. But no one had actually spoken to me. Not a word. No heads up. No call to ask if I was free that night. Nothing about what I might like to eat or wear or say. And that's when I understood. They weren't inviting me. They were including me. As in, let's make this look good for the guests. Not because I mattered, but because symmetry did. 2 children, 2 law schools, double the prestige. I clicked out of the email, closed my laptop, sat there in my chair, the crust of my sandwich untouched on the plate. That's when the pit in my stomach began to form. Not from the email, but from the clarity it delivered. I was being propped up like a store mannequin in a window display I hadn't agreed to be part of. The next morning, I opened Instagram. Calvina had already posted. A filtered photo of Eland in a navy blazer, standing with his arms crossed in front of a bookshelf, clearly posed at his office. The caption read, "Proud of our brilliant children, 2 lawyers in the making." My photo, just beneath his, was a cropped yearbook headshot from college. Flat hair, outdated smile, a pixelated reminder of how little thought went into finding it. And yet, I felt nothing. No spike of pain, no hot tears, just a slow, cold awareness that they would keep doing this, not out of malice, but out of habit. Because erasing me was easier than facing me, I didn't respond to the post, I didn't like it, I didn't comment, but I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder I'd quietly started building on my phone, labeled Receipts. That night, I lit a candle and opened my journal. The room was quiet. The air, still. My pen scratched across the page as I wrote, "If they want a cardboard cutout of me, let them print one. Just don't ask me to smile." I left the email unread, the RSVP unanswered. I didn't reply to the catering company. I didn't follow up with my parents. I did what they expected least, nothing at all. Days passed, then a week. Still no call, no text. Not even a passive-aggressive nudge about confirming attendance. I knew Calvina was watching to see if I'd share the invite or the Instagram post. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I poured myself into my prep work. My first semester was approaching, and I wasn't about to start it flustered. Every night, I reviewed case briefs, studied syllabus outlines, and organized folders. My calendar was cleaner than it had ever been. When I wasn't studying, I was walking. To clear my head, to avoid answering questions from neighbors, to remind myself that breathing was still free. One evening, just past dusk, I was on the balcony watering my dying succulents when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a distant cousin I barely spoke to. "Hey, so cool you and Eland are being honored. Can't wait to see you at the dinner." That did it. I didn't scream. I didn't type some raging reply. I just looked at the message and let the silence answer it. Then I opened the email invite once more, not to RSVP, but to delete it permanently. I wasn't going. Let them seat an empty chair with my name spelled wrong. Let them smile into a camera lens and toast to an illusion. I had no intention of attending a celebration where I was little more than background decor. If they wanted me present, they should have asked me directly. They should have called. Spoken. Reached out like I was a person, not a bullet point on a family resume. And in that moment, I felt something unfamiliar rise inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak, but a strange, steady resolve. The kind that didn't ask for applause, the kind that moved quietly, like a tide changing the shoreline. I didn't go to the party, but something of mine did, and it hit harder than my absence ever could. I stayed in that night. I didn't get dressed, didn't curl my hair, didn't press a dress shirt or wonder which heels to wear. I didn't need to. Instead, I lit 2 candles on the windowsill, fixed myself a modest plate of cheese and crackers, and sat on the couch with my legs tucked beneath me, watching the glow of downtown blink into evening through the glass. It was a Friday. I knew they were all already gathered, Calvina's voice likely fluttering through the room, her arm hooked through Gareth's. Eland, no doubt, in his usual well-fitted navy suit, smiling with that modesty he always wore like a tailored accessory. I opened Instagram around 6:47. The posts had started. One from my cousin Leah, a photo of the entrance to the venue, captioned, "So proud of this family." Another from one of Calvina's friends, a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking under soft chandeliers. I scrolled slowly, my thumb steady, heart not racing like I thought it would. I didn't feel fear or regret. I felt neutral, like I was observing someone else's life from a safe distance. And in a way, I was. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leah again. "Check this out. Look who's in the slideshow." Attached was a grainy video clip taken from a few rows back in the banquet hall. I tapped it open. A screen filled the backdrop of the ballroom, bordered with faux gold trim. The title read, "Our Brilliant Children, Eland Blair." For a moment I held my breath. Eland's section started. Photos of him as a child in school plays, winning debate tournaments, posing in front of the courthouse during internships. A few clips played with soft instrumental music, a timeline of triumph. Then it faded to black. Next slide, Blair Holloway. The screen flickered. First, an old elementary school photo. I was maybe 10, awkward smile, uneven bangs. Then, a spinning load icon, a buffering symbol that stayed there far too long. The room, even through the video, fell uncomfortably quiet. A moment passed. 2. Then the MC's voice, uneasy, trying to cover the mistake. "Well, technology, right?" A ripple of forced chuckles. Someone clapped once, then stopped. That was it. That was my moment. My segment. A blurry picture and a digital void. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat with it. They had forgotten me. In my own segment. Or worse. They never had anything else prepared to begin with. The video ended. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. The candles kept burning. The cheese was soft by then. I stood and walked to the kitchen, rinsed my plate, dried it, and returned to the living room where the silence sat heavier now, not bitter, but hollow. Later that night, lying in bed, I remembered something strange, a birthday party from when I was maybe 7. There's a photo we used to keep on the mantle, Eland in front of the cake, me slightly off to the side, halfway cropped by a balloon string. Even then, I was the extra seat, the forgotten corner. I thought of how many family albums had photos where I wasn't centered, not out of cruelty, but omission, the kind that comes from not being thought of at all. I turned over, stared at the dark ceiling, and whispered aloud, "What if I was never really wanted?" Not in a self-pitying tone, but like someone naming a shape they'd known their whole life but never labeled. The next morning, I got out of bed early. I opened my laptop and found a photo I'd taken on the day I was accepted to Columbia Law. Me holding the email printout, smiling in front of my apartment wall, still wearing my scrubs from the clinic job I worked back then. I printed it. Not to frame, not to post. I folded it down the center and tucked it into a drawer in my nightstand. Then I opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, I will no longer show up where I'm erased. There was no rage in it, no plea, just clarity. That night, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't forward the blurry video. I didn't reply to Leah. I didn't text Eland. I didn't rage call Calvina or Gareth. I let them have their toasts, let them post their filtered smiles, and give each other credit for raising two lawyers. They raised a glass to me like I was in the room. So I raised something back. A letter with no RSVP. After deleting the last text from Leah and silencing my phone, I got up from the couch and walked to my desk. The room was dim except for the flickering candlelight and the soft glow of my laptop screen. My heart wasn't racing. In fact, I felt surprisingly clear. I hadn't planned to do this. But after seeing that slideshow, something shifted. I reached for the thick ivory stationery I'd been saving since undergrad, the kind that feels too heavy for everyday use. I laid it flat and uncapped my pen. Then I wrote the letter. It wasn't long. It wasn't poetic. It was truth, trimmed of apology. No fanfare. No signature flourish. When I finished, I folded it carefully and slid it into the matching envelope. I reached for the wax seal kit my old roommate had gifted me years ago, melted a dollop of crimson wax, and pressed the letter B into it before it cooled. I didn't write Mom or Dad or Mr. and Mrs. on the front. I just wrote, "To the ones who forgot to ask." The next morning, after a quiet breakfast and a walk to clear my head, I searched for a courier. Not an app, not a student with a backpack, but a service that delivered discreetly and professionally. The kind of delivery that made people take notice. The man who arrived wore a pressed blazer and shoes that didn't make a sound on the floor. I gave him the envelope and the address of the hotel ballroom. "It's for Mrs. Stroud," I said. "Please ensure she receives it directly, during dinner, not earlier, not after." He nodded once. "We understand discretion." By 5:45 that evening, the party was already in full swing. My cousin's story showed the banquet hall glowing with soft lights and round tables set with gold-trimmed china. Eland stood near the podium, already shaking hands. My mother's dress sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Gareth laughed in the background, drink in hand. By 6:25, Calvina was standing at the front with a microphone. I watched the live stream through a second cousin's Facebook feed, muted. Her lips moved with practiced ease. She gestured toward Eland, beaming, then toward an empty chair at the main table. My chair, apparently. I leaned closer. "And of course, we are beyond proud of both our children," she said. "Blair couldn't make it tonight, but she's very much part of this celebration." Right then, the courier entered the frame. He stepped into the shot so smoothly it was like choreography. People turned to look. Calvina paused mid-sentence, startled. The courier approached the head table and said something quietly. Calvina nodded, confused, and took the envelope. She turned it over in her hand, saw the wax seal, and hesitated. I could almost hear her brain trying to assess whether this was a gift, a prank, or something more sinister. She broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and began to read. Her lips parted slightly. Gareth leaned in to look. Eland furrowed his brow. Then, silence. Even through the screen, you could feel it. The kind of hush that drops like a curtain. Not dramatic, just dense. No one spoke. No one moved. Someone at the next table coughed, as if to break the tension. And then, someone clapped, just once. A sharp, single clap. It stopped mid-air when no one joined in. The video ended. I sat back in my chair, took a breath, and closed my laptop. Later that night, I replayed the moment in my head. I imagined her reading the words, "Thank you for including my name in your celebration, but you never asked if I wanted to be there, only if I could make you look good. I hope the slideshow ran smoothly. I won't be attending. I'm not a prop in your story. No theatrics. Just the kind of message that lands like a paper cut, small but unforgettable. I didn't hear from them after. No phone call. No angry message. No passive-aggressive comment posted on social media. Just silence. 2 days later, Leah sent me a screenshot from a group chat I wasn't part of. Under a photo of the empty chair at the front table was her message. The room went dead after that letter. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because that night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about correction. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud. I felt like someone who had finally put down a burden they'd been carrying so long, they didn't know what their back felt like without it. I went to bed early that night, slept without dreams. And in the morning, I brewed coffee, opened the windows, and let the light in. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything, not even an explanation. I found out later that the letter had landed exactly as I intended. Quietly, precisely, with no theatrics. But what I hadn't counted on was someone else stepping into the silence I left behind. Someone who, for once, didn't stay seated. It was the next afternoon, a Saturday, when I got the text. From Safira, my aunt, my mother's older sister, the one the family usually described as eccentric or too academic, which was code for she doesn't play by our rules. Her message was brief. They deserved that. I blinked at the screen, then sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the words. I hadn't known she'd gone to the party. Safira rarely showed up at family events unless there was a death or a debate panel. But apparently, this time, she'd been there, and apparently, she'd seen everything. It wasn't until Monday morning that another message came through, this time from a cousin who'd overheard what happened. Safira hadn't just watched the moment unfold. She'd walked right up to the head table after the letter was read, picked it up from where my mother had laid it down like a hot poker, and calmly set it in the center of the table. She edited her out of the slides, Safira had said, loud enough for the room to hear. But Blair just edited herself out of your script. That was it. No raised voice, no insults, just one sentence, clean, deliberate, and final. Calvina didn't say a word. Gareth stood and muttered something about needing air. He slipped through the patio doors like a man looking for a place to hide. Elin stared straight ahead, his jaw stiff, his gaze locked on the centerpiece like it might offer him an exit. The room didn't explode. It deflated. A few relatives nodded slightly, others shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One aunt whispered something to her husband and stood up to leave. The rest stayed seated, fidgeting with their napkins, pretending to check their phones. No one applauded. And for once, the absence of applause was louder than any clapping could have been. Later that evening, when I finally called Safira, she answered on the first ring. "You didn't have to do that," I told her. "Sure I did," she said. "Someone had to speak like a grown-up in that room." I smiled, despite myself. She had always been the blunt one, the aunt who brought books instead of dolls when I was little, who told me I didn't need to be likable to be respected. Now it made sense why I'd always felt a little safer when she was around, even if I couldn't explain it back then. "They'll hate you for it," I said. "Good. I hope they stew in it. It's about time someone called out the way they rewrite people." I didn't argue, because she was right. 2 days passed without any word from Calvina or Gareth, not even a fake, "We were surprised by your letter," or "Wish you'd been there." Instead, something else arrived in my inbox, a link. Subject line, "Congratulations, Blair Holloway, Rising Stars of Law." It was from a local paper I barely remembered being interviewed by. Some student journalist had caught me between classes for a quick profile on young legal voices in the city. The article was short, simple, but there it was, my name, my photo, taken by the law school's admin assistant the day I'd helped organize a housing rights panel. I was laughing in the shot, half turned toward the camera, a legal pad in one hand. Below it, the caption read, "Blair Holloway, proof that brilliance doesn't always come with applause." I stared at it for a long time. Then I printed the article, trimmed the edges with a pair of scissors, and pinned it to the fridge with a tiny magnet shaped like a gavel, one I'd picked up at a dollar store during my first week of law school. I didn't frame it, didn't need to. It wasn't for show. It was for me. And when I stood in the kitchen that night, sipping tea and looking at that printout on the fridge, I felt something settle. They didn't say, "Congratulations." They didn't acknowledge the article. But the silence was beginning to feel less like rejection, and more like guilt they didn't know how to name. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. Just clear. And clarity, I was learning, was more powerful than their approval had ever been. The article stayed on my fridge like a quiet witness to progress. I didn't touch it, didn't glance at it often. It was just there, steady, unassuming, like the truth that didn't need to shout anymore. Weeks passed. Law school rolled forward, and I threw myself into outlines, mock hearings, and midnight readings. For a while, it felt like life had finally smoothed out, like the edges I used to bleed on were dulled. But that illusion lasted until the first tuition deadline. The alert hit my inbox on a Thursday. Reminder, outstanding balance due. Confused, I logged into the student portal. I was sure the scholarship funds should have cleared weeks ago. I double-checked the award letter, the confirmation, even the payment schedule. Still, my balance showed unpaid. I emailed the bursar's office. They replied within 2 hours. Hi Blair, according to our records, your grant was issued and successfully transferred to the recipient account on file 2 weeks ago. Let us know if you need the transaction reference. My pulse slowed, then quickened. I opened a spreadsheet I kept with all financial details. Cross-referenced the account numbers. One looked off. A chill crept in as I dug through old documentation. It was an account I hadn't touched in over a year, a joint one I had opened back when I was 19 and needed parental cosigners. I'd never gotten around to removing them, and it was still listed as my primary funding account with the university. I opened my banking app. The funds had been deposited, yes, but they were no longer there. The account had been drained within 4 days of the scholarship hitting. Electric bill, credit card payments, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize. The trail was digital, clean, and brutal. I stared at the numbers for a long time, jaw clenched, my body locked in place. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, betrayed again, this time with dollar signs. I emailed Calvina first. Short, direct. Did you access the joint account ending in 1413? The Columbia funds were routed there. The balance is gone. I need an answer. Immediately. No reply. I waited 6 hours. Then I emailed Gareth. Nothing. No one called. No one replied. The silence was familiar, but now it had a price tag. That weekend, I made an appointment with the campus legal services clinic. I walked in with a folder labeled Misappropriation of Educational Funds and laid it flat on the advisor's desk. The woman reviewing my file didn't blink. You have documentation? She asked. Everything. She scanned the pages for a few moments, then looked up. This'll get messy. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I stared at her. My voice came out even. They took my name, then they took my place, and now they've taken my future. Yes, I'm sure. The legal process wasn't fast. It rarely is. We filed the claim on a Wednesday morning. A formal complaint against both Calvina and Gareth. Civil, not criminal, yet. The aim, to retrieve the funds, freeze access to the account, and re-establish financial independence. A few days later, Gareth called. I didn't pick up. Instead, I let it ring out and saved the voicemail as evidence. His voice was calm, measured, like someone trying not to sound nervous. He said something about a misunderstanding and asked that we resolve this without causing embarrassment. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then came Calvina's email. Let's not make this bigger than it is, Blair. It's a technical mix-up. We didn't think you were still using that account. We thought it was safe to consolidate. Consolidate, as if my scholarship was a family pool fund. I didn't respond. I forwarded that too. The hearing date was set 6 weeks out. During that time, I kept my distance, focused on school, avoided family, refused to feed the guilt they tried to slip in through soft tones and veiled messages. On the day of the hearing, I wore gray slacks and a navy blouse. No makeup, just clarity. We met in a modest courtroom downtown, fluorescent lights humming above us. They showed up with a lawyer. Of course they did. I watched as Gareth avoided eye contact while Calvina clutched her purse with the same tight smile she always used when pretending everything was under control. The judge listened. I presented the transaction history, the emails, the lack of consent. Their lawyer argued miscommunication. No malicious intent, he said, Just an outdated system. But it didn't matter. The paper trail was clean, the case was solid, the judge ruled in my favor. Funds to be returned, full access restored, future grants rerouted to a new, independent account. The old one shut down, permanently. I stepped out of the courthouse into an overcast afternoon, the wind pressing lightly against my back. My attorney shook my hand and left for another case. I stood there for a few minutes on the steps, looking out at the parking lot, people rushing to and from their own conflicts. Then I saw Gareth. He was standing a few yards away, alone, adjusting his coat. He spotted me, hesitated, then took one step forward. I didn't wait. I walked past him, the click of my shoes sharp on the concrete. As I passed, I whispered, not for him, but for myself. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. And with that, I kept walking. The first time I saw the slideshow, I was just trying to check the weather. It had been 6 months since the court case. Since I'd walked past Gareth outside that courthouse, whispered my quiet line, and left their silence behind me. Since then, we hadn't spoken, not a text, not a call. My number stayed the same. So did theirs. One evening, as spring inched towards summer and finals had wrapped up, I opened Facebook to check for updates on a local storm warning. That's when I saw the video shared by my cousin Ellie. Proud moments of the Roscoe legacy. It took me a second to register what I was looking at. A polished slideshow set to generic piano music, the kind you hear in retirement tributes or scholarship galas. I clicked the volume off and started watching. First, Gareth and Calvina's wedding photo, then baby Eland in a blue knitted cap. Elementary school awards, debate team trophies, law school graduation photos, Eland at his firm's ribbon cutting. 5 minutes in, my name hadn't come up once. Then finally, a title card appeared. Blair Holloway. The music paused momentarily, as if shifting tone, and then, nothing. A gray slide appeared with white text. Unavailable at time of production. No photo, no quote, no clip, just a placeholder. Like I was an expired link. I didn't move for several seconds. I just stared at the screen. I wasn't angry, not in the usual way. This wasn't new, but the sheer shamelessness of it. It scraped a part of me I hadn't realized still had nerve endings. They didn't just omit me, they inserted a placeholder, like I'd failed to turn in my contribution, like my absence was my fault. I closed the laptop. 2 days later, the second blow came, this one sharper. A message popped up on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't heard from since law school. A guy named Jordan who used to copy my outlines and pretend they were his. He messaged casually, "Hey, random Q, did you help your brother with his recent scholarship essay? I'm reviewing apps for the Monterey Legal Aid Grant, and I swear I've seen some of those phrases before. Like, your phrases." I sat up straighter. "What phrases?" I asked. He copied and pasted a paragraph. My stomach dropped. It was a paragraph I'd written for a class assignment nearly a year ago, a personal reflection piece on systemic injustice. I had workshopped it with my advisor, kept it saved in my private writing folder. It had never been published, never shared. Except once, when I printed it for Calvina after she asked to see what I'd been writing in school, to share with a friend looking into grants for underrepresented students. I never heard about it again, until now. "Can you send me the whole essay?" I asked Jordan. He did. It wasn't just a quote, it was my voice. Start to finish, rearranged slightly, but unmistakably mine. Eland's name was on the header. The application had won. He'd received $15,000 in professional development funds. I sat at my desk, numb. No crying, no fists clenched, just a silence so thick I could feel it press behind my eyes. They had taken my words, my work, and used them to fund him. Again, I opened a new document, not to write an exposé, not yet. I began compiling a timeline, screenshots, copies, dated drafts, side-by-side comparisons. I labeled the folder, Truth Archive. I thought about posting it, thought about uploading it somewhere people would notice. Let the academic community tear them apart. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream into the wind. I wasn't going to be the woman online yelling about her family like a tabloid ghost. I would wait. I would choose the moment, not them. That night, I made tea and sat in the dark, staring at the glow of my desktop folder. They had taken so much time, money, voice. But what they hadn't taken was my ability to decide how this ended. They could rewrite all the slideshows they wanted, create all the legacy videos for the Roscoe name. But I still had the originals. I didn't block them. I didn't call. I didn't text. I watched, like I always had, quietly, carefully. A week later, I saw new photos on Calvina's profile, wine tastings in Napa. Her holding a glass of white in front of a vineyard sign, Gareth posing in a pressed button-down with the caption, "Recharge and refresh." No mention of law school, no mention of family. The distance between us had grown so vast, it no longer stung. It just felt peaceful. Because this time, I wasn't the one pretending. I wasn't erasing anyone. I was letting them write themselves out. I took one last look at the slideshow video, pressed save, then closed the browser. You can erase a person from a slideshow, but you can't erase what they've built when you weren't looking. I didn't expect the email when it came. It landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Local Voices in Law, Interview Opportunity." For a moment, I assumed it was spam, another newsletter I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. But then I read further. A producer at KSBY, one of San Diego's smaller local networks, had been following a community blog that highlighted underrepresented professionals. My name had come up. They were filming a short segment called Making Justice Personal, and they wanted me. I sat with it for a full hour before replying. There was no team to prep me, no stylist, no press manager, just me and a navy blue blazer I hadn't worn since moot court. I drove myself to the studio in a borrowed car, parked 3 blocks away because street parking was cheaper, and walked through the front door with my laptop bag slung over one shoulder and my palms slightly sweating. The waiting area smelled like overbrewed coffee and Lysol. A young assistant with kind eyes greeted me and led me past rows of cubicles to a modest studio setup. 2 chairs, a backdrop with the station's logo, and cameras on tripods that looked more professional than intimidating. The host, a woman named Deirdre, offered a soft handshake and warmer smile. "We'll keep this simple," she said. "Just speak from the heart. That's all we ask." I took a breath. The cameras started rolling. Deirdre began with easy questions. What made me pursue law? Where I'd studied? What kinds of clients I hoped to serve? I answered calmly, eyes steady, voice measured. Then she asked, "Was there a defining moment that shaped your path into law?" I paused. I could have dodged it. Given the usual lines, passion for justice, interest in policy, early exposure to books, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "Sometimes the hardest trials don't happen in court. They happen at dinner tables where silence is currency." Deirdre didn't flinch. "Would you like to explain that?" she asked gently. So I did. I talked about how some families prefer photo-ready success to quiet resilience, how I learned to navigate a household where applause was reserved, not earned. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I just spoke the truth. We wrapped 15 minutes later. I walked out of the studio into late afternoon light and didn't look back. By the next morning, the clip was online. At first, it was a blip, shared among locals, a few former classmates, a retired professor who emailed me saying, "You said what many of us have lived through. Thank you." Then the messages started pouring in. Women from Ohio, teachers from New Mexico, a retired Navy nurse from Florida, each one echoing the same sentiment. "That was me too." Or, "I thought I was the only one." And somewhere in the buzz, they saw it too. Calvina, Gareth, Eland. I know they saw it because the calls came in that night. 3 missed calls from my mother, 1 from Gareth, a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" Then another, "Your father is sick, we'd love your support." Then, "We miss you, Please let us explain. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email, clicked compose, and wrote a message. You didn't lose me to ambition. You lost me the day I succeeded, and you looked away. I stared at the screen, read it back twice, then hit delete. Not send, delete. I whispered aloud to the empty room. I'm not yours to lose anymore. The phone buzzed again. I silenced it. Later that week, I printed a still frame from the interview. One where I'm holding the mic, eyes focused, smile subtle, but sure. I placed it in a simple black frame, then set it on my bookshelf beside my law degree. Next to it, I placed the RSVP card from the party they'd never actually invited me to. The one I'd saved in a folder labeled Miss Regrets. Folded once, crease sharp, name misspelled. I pinned it beside the frame, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that I'd been there. That I was real. Even if they couldn't see it then. That evening, I made tea and turned off every screen in my apartment. I sat on the floor by the window and looked out at the city. The very city that had once felt too wide for me. Now it felt mine. I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. Like I had finally spoken in a room where I hadn't even been offered a seat. I didn't burn bridges. I just built a home on the other side. I remember the exact morning I left. It was quiet, like the air itself had agreed not to speak. I was 27. I had been packing for weeks, slowly, carefully, one drawer at a time, so no one would notice. The last night in that house, I didn't sleep. I sat in my childhood room, half empty, walls bare, cardboard boxes stacked like tired witnesses around me. Just before sunrise, I stood in the kitchen with the old refrigerator humming behind me. I pulled out a photo from a stack of family pictures I kept hidden in a manila envelope. It was from the year Eland got into law school. We were all standing in the backyard, Calvina glowing, Gareth in his suit, Eland front and center, and me, somewhere near the edge of the frame, smiling like a guest. I drew a single line across my name written in ink on the back. Then I took a Post-it, scribbled 6 words. Don't worry, I won't disturb again. I stuck it on the photo, pinned both with a magnet to the fridge, and walked out without making a sound. No letter, no goodbye. I didn't need a dramatic exit. I just needed to stop playing a part in a story I didn't write. 3 years later, a letter arrived at my new address. It was from Professor Alaric Vexley, who had written one of my early recommendations. I hadn't heard from him since graduation, so I opened the envelope with mild curiosity. Inside, a folded sheet with a handwritten note. Dear Blair, I saw your interview last week. Exceptional as always. I'm so proud of how far you've come. On a separate note, I recently reviewed an application packet for a scholarship board I consult on. One of the submissions, from your brother, included some phrasing, oddly familiar. It read like a younger version of you. Just thought you'd find that interesting. Warm regards, Alaric Vexley. I sat on the couch with the letter in my lap for a long while. No anger rose. No heat flared in my chest, just a tired, knowing breath. Of course he had used my words again. Of course no one said anything. And of course, even that betrayal came with silence. But this time, I didn't chase it. Didn't open the old folder titled Truth Archive. Didn't plan a response. There was no case to build. I had already won the one that mattered. Later that evening, I lit a candle on my desk. Same scent as the one from the night of Eland's party all those years ago. Lavender and bergamot. I looked around my apartment. My name was everywhere here. On books, on letters, on my own office door downstairs. My story wasn't hanging on someone else's wall. It was standing on its own legs. One wall held my degrees. Another had framed articles, editorials, community recognition, pieces I never bothered to share with family. In the center was a simple quote I'd printed on scrap paper and taped to the wall. Legacy is not who remembers you. It's what you build when no one claps. That night, I checked my email before bed. A message from Calvina sat unread in my inbox. I didn't even look at the subject line. I hovered over it, then clicked delete. Some doors don't need to be slammed. Some just don't get reopened. The following weekend, I hosted dinner in my apartment. Not a party, just dinner. Real plates, mismatched chairs, laughter spilling from the kitchen as someone tried to open wine with a bent corkscrew. There were 5 of us, 2 colleagues from work, a law student I mentored, Safira, and a friend who'd once shared my corner in the library when we were nobodies. We passed dishes, poured wine, argued over whether store-bought pie counted as homemade if you added whipped cream. When the plates were nearly cleared and the light was low, I stood with my glass in hand. They quieted instinctively. I cleared my throat, then smiled. To those who clapped when no one else saw the stage. The glasses raised. The sound was gentle, not thunderous, but it filled the room. As I sat down, Safira leaned over and whispered, "You look like someone who found her people." I smiled at her, eyes warm. I think I just stopped waiting for mine to arrive. Later, when everyone had left and I was rinsing glasses in the sink, I felt the stillness again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was peace. I dried my hands, walked to the wall where I'd pinned the RSVP card from years ago, and gently replaced it with a photo from tonight. A candid one, just smiles and shadows. I didn't need their applause. I had found something better. I wasn't forgotten. I was just waiting to remember myself. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to see us never really do. And when that happens, the strongest thing we can do isn't to fight louder, it's to live better. Have you ever had to walk away from the people you once called family, just to find peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more real, raw, and unforgettable stories coming your way.